In this white space, you feel protected and confident. In this white space, imagine now that you stand up comfortably. Take a few steps ahead, one at a time, at your own pace. Imagine now that this white space is on the terrace of the tallest building in the city. You can imagine it to be as tall as you wish it to be. This white space that is surrounded with is on the terrace of the tallest building in the city. And you're now standing, moving ahead, 1 foot at a time, at your own pace. One step after another, you come almost to the edge of the terrace. And you realize that there is no parapet. There is no railing, there is no wall. There's nothing between you and that deep drop of a few hundred feet, about 1 foot away from you. What is the feeling that you have? Would you like to take that one step ahead? Or would you want to step back? Let's maintain that feeling with us, acknowledge it as we slowly come back into this room. Be aware of your own self in this room, and when you're ready, gently open your eyes. Let's have a few reactions. What were those feelings at the edge of that terrace? Anyone who'd like to share?
That's my heart in my mouth. Tremendous anxiety.
Tremendous anxiety, okay.
Scared.
Scared? Okay.
I could almost, relive the moment I had my childhood once it happened. I almost, went back when I was a child and it happened. As curious.
Okay. So you went back to your past. How was the feeling?
Suddenly you hit the beach.
Scared? Okay. Any other reactions? Fear of death. Okay. You were enjoying it. That's interesting. Tell me more.
What about next?
Would you have taken that step forward?
But
Okay.
not supposed to.
Would you have taken that step?
Yeah.
Okay. So you enjoyed that feeling. What was the feeling that you associated?
Whatever it is. Whatever it is.
Whatever it is. Okay.
That moment, you like it.
Interesting.
You like it.
Okay, let's keep that in mind. That's a very interesting reaction again.
Mostly what I did was actually reading on the newspapers committing
Suicides?
suicides. So that is exactly what you felt.
Okay.
What was the reaction of the person who must have done that?
Okay.
Especially jumping from the terrace.
Were there any personal emotions that came in particularly for you?
Basically the impact of reading
Okay.
must have
There was no particular situation that came up.
something like what your
Okay. Okay.
One emotion or one feeling that occurred to me is that in life you have to take risks, but ensure that they are calculated risks, not reckless risks.
Okay.
That moment before that thing happened.
Okay. Again, there are different reactions, right? Right. So here we were talking of controlled risks, whereas there's another reaction where the person says, I was ready for anything. Now, when we talk of self-awareness, we begin with understanding what leads to awareness. This exercise was, in one sense, an exercise in acknowledging that awareness. What was that feeling at that situation? And this situation is where you are in a space where you have no clue what lies ahead. Perhaps, you never know, the next step that you took, you may have sprouted wings, flew in the sky. Or perhaps you stepped out and you realized there was a safety net. But the assumption usually is, I don't want to fall. There is a fear and the gut reaction stops us. Right? Even without us knowing that what lied ahead. All we said was there was no parapet. And our conditioning said no parapet means death. And then it leads to a chain reaction where someone says suicide, someone said childhood fear, scary. So there is a lot that clouds our awareness simply because of conditioning or old memory patterns. So let's talk of what are the states of being and what blocks our awareness in the first place. Now, whatever I would be talking about today and the discussions that we will be leading to are based on various kinds of philosophies and various kinds of books, and obviously some of our own experiences and thoughts. So the first thing that I'd like to touch upon is 3 states or 3 conditions of life. This is put across in various kinds of philosophies. The one I'm talking about particularly is what is called the Aharata philosophy, which is practiced, which is of Indo-Tibetan origin. Now you find a few Himalayan masters practicing it, but it's more prevalent in the Tibetan and the Siberian regions. This particular philosophy talks of 3 conditions of life. The first condition being that of being spread. Now we're talking in terms of our energies, our personalities. The second condition being that of identification. And the third one is that of awareness. Now when we talk of the condition of being spread, that's usually the most prevalent condition for most of us in our day-to-day lives, where there is a lot of stress and anxiety and worries. What we mean by being in a spread state energetically is a state where we have a certain focus in our lives. Probably we have a career plan, we have a business plan, something to do with our families, children, parents. However, we do not get to meet all those plans the way we wish to, simply because of the fact that our body wishes to do something, our mind has a certain plan, our spirit leads us somewhere else altogether, and there is a society around us which pulls us in a 4th direction. Right? So we call it the spread state because there is a limited amount of control that we exert firstly on ourselves and therefore on the people and the influences around us. Okay? A very common state to be in, but can easily be controlled with a fair amount of awareness. The second condition of life is what is called as a state of identification. A state of identification does come with a fair amount of judgment in terms of saying, for example, yes, I identify that I have a short temper, or I identify that I'm a very patient person and therefore I need to take up a profession like teaching. Or I identify that I'm a good orator and therefore I'd like to be a lawyer. Right? So there is an identification with certain qualities, certain personality traits, and you try and use those traits in either your profession, in your family, in your community and social life. Right? Well, we say that it comes with a certain amount of judgment because the moment we give ourselves an identity, there is a label. For example, I say, I'm a doctor. I might fit with a label of saying, okay, I'm completely analytical, logical. I keep my emotions away when I treat my patients. Or let's say I'm a social worker. My identification is that I empathize, I understand people's emotions, I'm sensitive. Right? or I'm proactive for that matter. So there is a certain label that we attach to ourselves, and the state of identification might be a hurdle for us at some point where we do not need that identification anymore. For example, let's say I am a teacher and my identification is that I deal with children, I understand emotions, I'm sensitive, but at the same time, with that identification comes the fact that I control my class. Do I need that identification when I'm with my family at home? But then I'm so strongly identified with it that perhaps at home I unconsciously try and apply that control factor to my family, to my parents, children, spouse, whoever. So that state of identification is again one state which is slightly better than being completely spread, but not really the end of it. The third state is what we should really be aiming at developing, but at the same time we need to understand the state of awareness is not a destination. It's always work in progress. So in that sense, it's always a journey towards awareness and not really a stop or a station called awareness. The state of awareness is where we say that we are an observer to our own life. For example, I may say that, yes, I understand that I have a certain trait which I use positively in my profession. However, I understand that I do not need that trait when I'm with family, and therefore I'm a different person when I'm with my family. So a state of awareness is where we are in a neutral observer state, and that is what we need to move towards when we're talking of self-awareness. Firstly in personal and intrapersonal behavior, and then moving on the second step into interpersonal behavior. The state of being spread, as we said, is probably the most natural state that comes in because of various influences, and if we are not really in a position to center ourselves from time to time during the day, it can become a very distraughtful state to be in, simply because we are pulled in various directions by various people and by ourselves very often. Because we tend to take up things, do things which we really do not want to, and that can create a conflict within self. And therefore, it is obviously a better state to be identified, where you say that, all right, my work demands that I need to have these particular traits. Let me exhibit those traits positively at work. However, the moment I step out of office, I need to understand that I probably do not need those traits anymore. Let me move out, adapt, and respect various other aspects of my own personality. But of course, eventually we would definitely look at moving to a state of awareness where we say that, fine, I have certain labels, but I do not need them all the time. Let me be aware of when I'm using what label, and then eventually move out of that labeling, out of the space of judgment. Now, most meditation practices or philosophies tell us being judgmental is bad, negative. However, it's probably the most natural thing that comes to us. The moment we see a thing, we're bound to say good or bad. There is a tone which we normally assign to it. So obviously it's not the easiest of things to work on when we say let's start being non-judgmental altogether, because the moment we say I'm being judgmental, let me stop, that in itself is a judgment. I'm judging myself. Right? So it's obviously not something that we can actively work on. It is really a state of moving away into neutrality that will cause non-judgment. It's not something that can be directly worked upon. Now, how do we translate this into, how do we transcend from being spread to being identified to being aware? Let's understand what are the kinds of control dramas that we play in our day-to-day lives. Okay. When we talk of various kinds of behavior, I'm sure a lot of us have spoken in terms of aggression and passive behavior and passive aggression, and the fourth kind being assertive behavior. In one sense, both being aggressive and being passive are two sides of the same coin, in the sense that Aggression is simply expression of emotion in whichever form that it comes in, whereas being passive is a state of suppressing that emotion. It's pretty much the same, being expressed in different ways. Now, if we have to club various kinds of behaviors, most of us would identify with 4 kinds of what are termed as control dramas by James Redfield. James Redfield is the author of several books, including The Celestine Prophecy and the entire series, and he's also produced a few movies. He talks of 4 states, okay, 2 of which come out of being aggressive, and 2 of which come out of being passive. 2 states that he talks of for an aggressive person are those of an intimidator and an interrogator. And in terms of passive, this usually it usually goes on to a corresponding response where you have what is called as a poor me and aloof. Now, why do we label these as control dramas? Control dramas because these are typically the emotional responses that we follow in our day-to-day interactions, with anybody, be it our colleagues, family, friends, whoever. There are predominant kinds of control dramas that we tend to follow in order to protect ourselves, right? And where does the need for protection comes from?
It's a natural instinct.
A natural instinct coming from? Insecurities, okay.
A sense of survival.
Survival, yes. Where did that need for protection come from when we were about to take that last step on the terrace? Fear? Ego. Why do you think it came from ego?
I mean, the entire concept of my being is my ego.
Okay, your beingness is being challenged. Uncertainty, yes. Again, uncertainty about survival leading to fear. I'm sorry? Attachments, yes, that's a very important emotional thing. Again, attachments come from the fact that you would like to be recognized, that there is a social identity that is attached to us, and therefore there are other people that revolve around it. At the same time, there was a reaction where this person said, I would go ahead. Where was the fear? Okay. And why not? Okay.
Go ahead. Let's see what will happen.
Okay. Now here again, he's at a different state where he views things from a very childlike perspective. Instead of us, if he had put a 2-year-old child there on the terrace, would the child have thought about it? He would have very gladly taken the next step without really knowing what he was getting into. And for all you know, he would have sprouted wings and flown. Right? So it's when we talk of these reactions that come in, it's primarily because of one primal instinct, fear. Right? When we classify emotions, there are primarily 3 emotions that we talk about, which are labeled as being on the negative side, or negative simply because of the fact that they harm us or restrict us as humans. The primary one being fear, second one being anger, and the third being guilt. Guilt. Okay. Fear simply because of the fact that it challenges our existence. Any kind of fear comes from the fact that somewhere our personality, our beingness, our relationship, our identity is being negated in some way. Anger comes from the fact that, where does anger come from? Unfaithful desires. Unfulfilled desires, okay.
Some kind of frustration.
Frustration again coming from?
Suppose there is an obstacle in achieving something, some kind
Right.
of obstacle, and you are not successful in surmounting or overcoming that obstacle.
Right. Okay. Let's say you assign a task to your colleague or your peer. The person does not do it on time, and which results in a certain cost to you professionally. Would you be angry on that person? Why would you be angry? Is it just the cost?
Besides that, I expect if he's been inefficient or grossly negligent, then that is bound to enrage me.
Okay, now, again, let's hold on to that. The person is being grossly negligent, unprofessional, not doing well in work, right? We are saying that the problem lies with the person. Why are you angry?
Ultimately, I am accountable being at the helm of affairs.
Okay, which means?
So I should ensure my subordinates produce the desired result, their efficacious. And the buck
Go
stops at
on.
me.
Okay, and therefore?
So I should...
It comes out of helplessness. And being helpless. I mean, in this situation, you're not able to do anything beyond that.
There may be feeling of self-loath on account of me being erroneous in appointing the wrong person.
Okay, hit the nail. Self-loathing. Anger comes from the fact that you expect certain things from somebody because you assume you control that person's behavior. The very fact that you expect, when you delegate a task to a colleague or to a family member, you expect the person to complete it well because it has a bearing on your personality. Because you identify with that task that was delegated, and therefore when that task is not done, there is self-hatred which in turn translates or reflects as anger. So when we talk of anger, really it's not about projecting something onto another person, but it's because deep down somewhere you've hated yourself. Right? So that's one root cause that we really need to understand when we're tackling with anger as an emotion. What is it that in that situation that makes you hate yourself? What makes you feel disgust for yourself? What makes you feel helpless? Right? It's not the sheer feeling of helplessness, but the fact that I am helpless when I should not be, and therefore I hate myself.
Ultimately, I'm not accepting the situation.
Right? So where does that hatred come from, and why is it that you identify yourself so much with that situation? So what if the colleague resulted in a loss?
Because there is a possibility of there are a lot of things at stake. I end up losing and incur a loss. A loss could be irreparable or very damaging.
Okay. Let's say you lose your most important client. Okay. What happens?
It has an adverse bearing on my reputation.
On your reputation. Again, what does the reputation mean to us?
It's the way you're recognized and perceived in society or in the legal
Recognized or perceived, your self-image
in society.
At large, and therefore for yourself.
Everything, the pointer is self, eventually at the end of the
Yes. Ego again, and therefore when we talk of being angry at somebody or being frustrated with a situation, it's simply because we tend to identify ourselves with that situation. We get personal about it. Right? Somebody pushes us in the train. You end up shouting at the person, but the person does not really know you. He wouldn't really care. But again, we identify ourselves with that person and that particular situation simply because somewhere there is a self-loathing and lack of self-image which says, if I was pushed, it's because I'm not worthy.
Yeah, I see.
Right? And that's what we need to identify when we talk of anger as a pattern in terms of emotions. If we tend to get angry or frustrated or irritated with things around us or with people around us, where is that lack in self-image coming from? Is it from the fact that somewhere in childhood our parent did not acknowledge something?
Maybe.
Is it because somewhere in childhood, maybe in 3rd standard, our teacher did not acknowledge the fact that we wrote a nice essay? Or in 7th standard, we scored 45 out of 50 and the parents said you should have scored 48. Where does that self-loathing comes from? That gap in self-image is what you need to identify the next time you're angry or irritated or frustrated. Anger does not mean physical violence. It could be mild annoyance at something, and that's a good point to start with. I try and understand what is it that's so personal to me in that situation that I am feeling that disgust. And that's the starting point when it comes to self-awareness. So we talk of fear as a primal emotion, anger as another one. The third being guilt. Again, where does that come from?
From the fact that if you indulge in something, you indulge in something that gives you pleasure.
Okay.
But from a perspective of society, from a moralistic perspective, it is forbidden and condemned.
Okay.
So just because a scores of people think it's forbidden, you do it, and then there is a feeling of guilt. And no sooner people discover that you have done this, they start condemning you, taking pot shots at you, taking allegations. That's when the guilt arises.
Okay. Doing something that I supposedly should not have done.
From a moral perspective.
Okay. And beliefs. Okay. Yes. Morals, of course, can be translated into a variety of beliefs depending on the society or the community that we live in. But what is that primal reason behind guilt? Consciousness about?
Sometimes thinking.
Okay. Okay.
It's the basically doing.
Right. But why is it that some people, or most of us for that matter, cannot just do it? Guilt could be something as simple as saying that, let's say I have a little child at home and somebody at work gave me luscious mangoes to eat at lunch. I eat those mangoes and then I feel guilty about the fact that I ate it without my family. Guilt could be as simple as that. Where does that come from? A guilt does not necessarily have to mean I go and murder somebody and therefore feel guilty about it.
If the mind doesn't listen to the act, you suffer.
There is a conflict, right? But why is there a guilt? Why should I feel guilty about enjoying good mangoes without my kid?
There is a sense of selfishness in the act of selfishness.
Act of selfishness. And why do I perceive it as being selfish? Do I not have a right to enjoy those mangoes?
But at the same time, you feel you have an obligation towards your family or your kids.
Okay.
As this gentleman rightly said, there is conflict of two different concepts.
If there is only one mango, take one away. There are many mangoes.
Okay, but again, very often we do not. If it's only one mango, I'd rather not have it. Give it to somebody else, be perceived as being altruistic. Right? Where does that come from? Feeling of lack of self-worth. I do not deserve those mangoes. I'd rather give it to my child so that I'm perceived as being charitable, being altruistic, so that my self-image rises. And there is a gap that is filled in me, not in the child. The child does not miss those mangoes. Yes.
When you want to give it to a child, it is not that feeling that I don't deserve it. But I feel I must give it too much. It is not.
See, in some case, if it's purely out of love, it's a different issue. If I've eaten it and then I keep feeling bad about the fact that, oh, I did not share it with my family, then there is guilt. Right? See, if it was purely out of love, I would probably pick up some mangoes on my way home, give it to the child and get done with it. There is no guilt associated with it. Right? But if I'm feeling the fact that, oh, I should not have.
Yeah, or the feeling that someone is more deserving of this mango than me. It may be my child, it may be my father, it may be X.
Yeah. So,
by being less deserving.
So again, it comes from a certain lack in the self-image. There is somewhere you have a script written in you which says, I am not worthy of it, somebody else is. And if I fulfill that person's desire, perhaps I may be more worthy.
It emanates from a feeling of low self-esteem.
Low self-esteem. Again, now if you look at both of these, anger and guilt, they come from that certain gap where we say self-image could have been here, but it's here. And all the time when I'm trying to perceive that lack of self-worth, saying I'm not deserving of it, all I'm trying to do is hit this, but all I'm doing in the process is widening that gap. Every time I give that mango to the child, and at the cost of my pleasure, I'm saying that no, I don't deserve it because there is a gap. And the gap, if you look at it energetically, spiritually, is because I perceive myself as being distant or away or separate from my child, or separate from my employer or husband or parents or whoever. So there is a sense of separation that we have, which creates the fact that there is me and there is society, and therefore there is a need for what we term as interpersonal behavior. Otherwise, everything would be intrapersonal, right? So the very need for self-awareness and the very need for discussing something like interpersonal skills come from the fact that we perceive ourselves as being separate from each other. And of course, that's where conflicts also manifest, internal conflicts going out in terms of social and religious and communal. Okay, so conflicts manifest from that point where there is an acknowledgement of separation. Of course, energetically, as an earth, as a world, we are moving to a point where that gap is merging, but it definitely helps if we are more aware of ourselves and close that gap on our own rather than waiting for that thrust in any form, because that thrust might come in a very different way. For example, if you look at the recent volcano incident in Iceland, thousands of people stranded at airports across the world, and if you look at most airports, international airports particularly, there is that whole snobbish air to the atmosphere where people stay separate, do not mix with each other much unless you really know everyone else. Now if you look at people stranded on the airport, there are people sleeping around, sleeping on the floor, everyone helping each other with food, water. It's because there is an external manifestation of that internal conflict which has pushed them to a situation where they're so uncomfortable that they're bound to get together. But do we need that volcano every time? At times we cannot really afford it, and therefore it's better not to wait for that internal volcano to erupt. It's better to be aware. So when we talk of aggressive and passive behavior, both of them obviously come from these three primal so-called negative emotions of fear, anger and guilt. Aggressive and passive, these are primarily modes of expression of these three emotions. Aggressive is where you go all out and express your fear and anger and guilt in a non-desirable way, non-desirable to yourself and perhaps to people around you. Passive is obviously where you experience these three emotions again, but you choose to suppress it. Of course, it may come to a point where you become passively aggressive and start expressing it in a very subtle way where perhaps you don't realize how you're expressing it, but the others feel the hint. Now, when we talk of control dramas that we indulge in, the aggressor usually tends to indulge in a control drama of what is called as an intimidator, or typically a bully. Okay? I'm sure all of us remember some kind of a bully in school, in our class. There's usually this one big fat fellow who tries and beats up everybody, eats everybody else's tiffins, steals everyone's pencils. Right? So, where does that intimidator come from? Is he the intimidator simply because he's big and well built?
Maybe he also has a giant that takes his ego, along with the size.
Okay.
Ego.
There's an ego. Again, where does it come from?
Ego is basically a sense of self that is existing within.
Mm-hmm. Is it sense of self or sense of lack of self? If it was a sense of if ego were a sense of self simply means I am and I acknowledge myself as I am. Whereas the kind of situation that we are talking about is where we're saying that I am not and therefore I need to keep thrusting myself.
Kind of constant reminder to myself.
Yeah, when I'm stealing somebody's pencil or I'm pushing somebody else down or I'm threatening that small little fellow, what I'm saying is I need to do that because otherwise I would not exist. Right? It's a threat to self, and therefore that's where the intimidator comes from. It's from a space of extreme fear, where I say that till the time I make my presence felt in a very aggressive manner outside, I will not exist. My personality is not being recognized, and therefore I need to shout. I need that space around me. I need that aggressive body language. Right? And I need that whole platform to speak and shout and yell about so that I am recognized. It comes from a fear of lack of existence, lack of others acknowledging me, primarily coming from the fact that I don't acknowledge myself. Okay? And that's where the intimidator comes from. I'm sure some of us might relate to the intimidator drama in certain relationships in our lives. If you think back, is there a situation where there's a certain relationship where you often people tell that person, do it this way? Typically in a parental relationship, come home before 7 o'clock or else. Right? And why does that or else come? Right? I mean, if you have a good sense of self-worth, you would probably tell the child that this is the reason why I say you need to come home before 7. You may make your own choices, but understand these are the consequences. Right? Now, it's the same thing that you're communicating, but why do you say or else? Is because it's not so much of the concern for the child that comes at that point. What's dominating you is, are you listening to me? Right? So what happens, it's not so much about the fact that you do not love your child when you're being intimidating. It's because of the fact that the lack of love for self overrides the love for child. And therefore you tend to say, you better behave. Right? So that's the intimidator control drama, where we try and control, we try and dominate, try and get work done by sheer predominance. The second second control drama where aggressiveness is expressed is what is called as an interrogator. An interrogator is typically a person who is likely to be questioning everything and anything that you do, being a skeptic, being suspicious. Typically, let's say for example you walk into a shop. You want to buy something which is slightly more expensive, let's say an electronic item. The salesman obviously tries to sell you on the basis of all the good points, and you keep questioning, what if this happens? What if there is a power trip? What if something goes wrong? What if the warranty is not valid? What if... There's so many questions that come up, and why does all that interrogation come up as a pattern?
Uncontrollable inquisition or curiosity.
Okay.
Curiosity knows no bounds. Person doesn't know where to draw the line as far as curiosity goes.
Is it just curiosity? The focus should be on me, okay?
Sometimes the person is out of position, whether he's making the right decision or the wrong
Okay.
purchase. The item.
Okay. Unsure.
What will happen? What will
Okay.
be the reaction at home?
Which means I am supposed to be responsible for this purchase,
Because I'm making this.
right? But I really don't want to be responsible. Therefore, I'd rather question the salesman. I'll blame him if things don't work. I was not responsible. The salesman gave me the wrong information. Right? Again, interrogator, another form could be what is typically expressed in the form of a person who nags. Where were you? Why did you come home late? Who were you with? Right? Typically those kind of questions that rise in usually a marital relationship or even in a parental relationship, series of questions. Right? Again, where does that come from? Yes. I'm sorry? Low confidence, okay. Paranoia, again, fear, extreme sense of fear of losing. Okay. Right. Of course, there may be a sense of worry where you say, why were you late? I was worried about you. But that's different from having a volley of questions where you say, why were you late? And I think you were with this person. You keep lying to me. Right? The whole thing that goes on.
So many thoughts will come, different.
And those thoughts come up simply, again, because of the fact that the focus is us, not so much the person who came late, but the fact that does this person not value me? If he said he'll be coming in at 8 and he came in at 10, am I not worthy of those 2 hours? Okay. Again, there is a sense of fear of losing, which, as we said, comes from attachment. And that attachment is there because I feel worthy because of my relationship with that person. Now, when that person does not acknowledge that relationship, my worth is questioned. Dependency, and the dependency comes from the fact that I do not acknowledge me as me, but as somebody's daughter, somebody's wife, somebody's mother. Right? But when I seal off that and say, I am me and therefore I am somebody's wife and therefore I am somebody's mother or daughter or sister, then the whole table turns. Right? So 2 expressions of aggression in the form of intimidator who bullies, interrogator who questions, is skeptic, doubtful, suspicious. On the passive side, when a person chooses to suppress those primal emotions of fear, anger and guilt, you get into a control drama where you start playing poor me. Okay? For example, let's say the wife is the interrogator. Where were you? Where did you go? You always come late. I'm a victim of my wife. What do I do?
Self-pity.
Right? Or typically, even a parent who is an intimidator to a child. You scored only 40 out of 50. What happened to the... You should compare yourself with your neighbor. The neighbor has scored 42. Again, that intimidation that comes from, and the child says, okay, no matter how much I score, I'm going to be compared. Poor me, I'm always a victim. And when that I'm a victim is ingrained into that 5-year-old, even when he's 50, he'll still be a victim. Because if you look at our mental scripts that are drawn in our circuits of consciousness, those scripts are written and concretized by the age of 6. Anything beyond that just stays. And therefore, if by the age of 6 you've told your child, you're not doing well, you're a poor performer, you're bad, you're lazy, the child will grow up with that thing in his mind that I'm lazy, I'm poor, I'm a victim, I'll always be intimidated, and therefore I'd rather be withdrawn. There is that constant sense of helplessness, saying the world is bad, no matter how well I do, I'm going to be compared with others and I'm going to be blamed, so let's not do too much about it. Right? You're hampering your own performance with the fact that, poor me, I'm helpless because I'm surrounded by these people. On the other hand, you have the 4th control drama of being aloof, completely withdrawn. You walk into the house, there is a volley of questions, ignore, walk into your bedroom, shut the door. Right? Where you say that, okay, no matter what, I'm not going to be respected. I'll accept the fact that I'm not going to be respected and I'm not worthy of that respect. I'll stay away. Which is in terms of behavior or emotional control, it can get into a dangerous state when you talk of being aloof, because as we were talking about, suicides come at this point where the predominant control drama is being aloof. The person says, I don't identify with the society anymore because they don't respect me for what I am. I'll be by myself. But when it comes to a point where the distance becomes too great for any sort of a connect to be achieved, then the person says, life is not worth living anymore. Right? And that, it depends on where your other control dramas lie. If you're able to shift more often from being aloof to being an intimidator or an interrogator or a poor me for a little while, it means that the person is slightly capable of getting back into the social circle. There are greater chances of survival. But if the person goes on and on into the aloof mode, then it's a spiral of depression, and those are cases that we need to watch out for in terms of people around us. But for us, in terms of self-awareness, when we talk of these 4 control dramas, I'm sure most of us would associate ourselves with one particular drama that we play with. If you look at your most important relationships in your life, it could be with your boss, with your spouses, parents, children, whoever that you're very close to. Which drama do you play?
All at different times.
It's not unrewritable. It can change, but then there's usually one predominant one, and that's what you need to identify if you're moving from that state of being spread to being identified and eventually to being aware. If you wish to change that script, it's that drama that you need to identify. What is it that I tend to play all the time? Maybe. Yeah. Look back at your childhood and figure out what is it that was written in my mind. Okay? Let's do this again. Let's get back into that relaxed state. Try and figure out. Okay. Sit back. Close your eyes, center yourself. Let's take a few deep breaths. Breathe in till the time I count 3. 1, 2, 3. Hold your breath and breathe out to the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3. Hold. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3. In. 1, 2, 3. Hold. And out. 1, 2, 3. Imagine yourself again being covered by an extremely protective white space. This is a space of your own energies, created by your higher selves, with your angels, with your deities, the God that you believe in, the forces that protect you. You're engulfed, cocooned in this white space around you. This white space is now a cloud that carries you gently with it. You can feel that gentle breeze. And this white cloud gently lands on top of a staircase, a beautiful wide staircase. You land at the top of the staircase. And then, with the space cocooned around you, you begin to descend down, one step at a time. at your own pace. Go down. There are 7 steps to go. Now 6, 5. As you descend, you feel more layers of protection onto you. 5, 4. You're completely protected and aware only of yourself and your higher energies. 4, 3, 2, 1. And you see this door opening in front of you. The moment you step out of this door, you will see and recall that situation from your childhood that has written the most impactful script in your memory. If you wish to, you can simply be an observer, float in your cloud, and not be involved in the situation that you see or recall. If you feel comfortable, you can go and relive that situation and understand that you're protected by the cloud. You will not be harmed even if you relive that situation. It is the situation that has written the most impactful script on your mind. Take a few moments to live that situation, or simply float around it. See it